We have a special guest this week, a friend of Cincy Jungle, a sometimes contributor there. He can also be heard with James Rapine, I think is the correct pronunciation. Another Cincinnati sports figure with ESPN 1530, and it's Joe Goodberry, draft expert, and a lot of you who are on Twitter know him, follow him, and we love your stuff. Joe, thanks for making the time for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always nice to talk to you, Anthony.
Yeah. First of all, before we get into any of the draft talk, we were talking before the show started. Congratulations on the new addition to your family, man. You're a full-blown adult now, 3 kids. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's not as fun as you're making it sound right now, but but yeah, if you hear a baby crying in the background, that's the new one.
Yeah, you and I have the new dad bags under the eyes. Yeah.
That's not the lighting. Those are real bags.
That's right. Well, thanks for joining us. I know Scott and I have a bunch of questions. We also want to make this interactive to those who are watching us live. So if you have a question for Joe or a question for our segment at the end of the show when we do fan questions, definitely leave it in the YouTube chat. Leave it in that thread, the comment thread in Cincy Jungle, and we'll try and get to all of those that we can. Joe, there's so many places I could start with the Bengals and the draft. I guess I'm going to start off with the wide receiver talk. And from what I gather on your Twitter account, you are all in on Corey Davis, at least in this draft. I'm a bit more onto Mike Williams, just maybe for a little bit more of a pro-ready type of guy. I think there might be a tiny bit more upside with Corey Davis. People have their favorites. Why Davis for you?
For a few reasons. I think he is a better route runner. I think he's much more athletic. When I watch him, he moves, for a guy that's as big as he is, much more fluid, much more athletic than you would expect. When we see this every week when we watch AJ Green, a guy that size, and he's not Green size, he's not 6'4", but at 6'2" and some change, 215, he runs like a guy who's 5'10", 195. His quickness and agility. He looks like Chad Ochocinco in his routes and cutting. And after the catch, he's about as good as you can get for a college prospect coming into the NFL. He's going to catch those short passes, those quick passes the Bengals love to throw. And he's going to be a threat the Bengals don't have in terms of yards after the catch. The reason I like him more than Mike Williams, and especially for the Bengals, because I do like Mike Williams, it's just – Mike Williams was the A.J. Green of the Clemson offense. Yeah. And you may say, well, that's not a bad thing. But Green gets a lot of those one-on-one. He may not be wide open targets where Dalton's going to look out there and say, okay, I've got Green and I'm going to throw it up to him. That was Mike Williams in the Clemson offense. So when you watch that, he gets a lot of targets where he's not open. They're just throwing it up and giving it to him, giving their best guy a chance to make a play. I don't think he'd get those same opportunities with the Bengals. I think those opportunities are maybe 5 to 6 times a game, and those go to A.J. Green right now. So for the fit, I love Corey Davis for the Bengals. I even like John Ross. I wouldn't be mad if they took John Ross out of Washington with that 4.2 speed, and he really has that. He looks like Deshaun Jackson, blazing speed, going deep, great ball skills, but he's also a really good route runner and great after the catch. He's got a little Odell Beckham in him. I don't think he has the same hands, but movement skills, Antonio Brown type agility and explosion. That's a guy I'd like to have on the Bengals too.
So first off, Joe, thanks for joining us. Anthony did mention you on 1530 AM out of Cincinnati, which I have heard before. I think I heard you on there a couple weeks ago talking about Leonard Fournette. And the question I have is, I've on this podcast, anyone who's heard this podcast has heard me wax on and on about Joe Mixon and how much I love Joe Mixon as a pure talent. So the question I have is, if I understood correctly when you were on the radio, Leonard Fournette was a guy you were very high on the Bengals possibly taking with the first pick, that 9th overall. So the question I have is, and I'll admit I am not a professional draft scout, draft expert, just a casual fan watching the play. Whenever I see Fournette, making his big plays, it seems that he's either getting great blocking or doesn't seem to be knocking over anyone other than, little defensive backs as far as like the power. So what is it that people like me are missing? Because I know a lot of drafts people are really high on him. And I know some of our fans are really mixed on Mixon, Fournette, Cook, or whoever else, be it McCaffrey or whoever. So what could you tell us about Fournette that might help sway us that direction if the Bengals were to go with Fournette?
Yeah, and the question is a little bit more nuanced, or the answer is a little bit more nuanced, because while I think the Bengals probably like Fournette, and I think that he definitely could be an option at number 9 for them, I don't love Fournette. I do think Mixon is better. I think Christian McCaffrey is a better running back. I think Dalvin Cook's a better running back than Fournette, especially when I try to factor in fit for the Bengals. The comparison between Jeremy Hill, and Leonard Fournette's going to be there because of the school. But it's also because of the same offense. They're running out of the same offense, I formation, follow the fullback, power run schemes. A lot of their runs, if you go back and watch Jeremy Hill's college tape, like you said, they're breaking through 8 in the box and they're taking it off 60 yards, and maybe they have to break an arm tackle on a defensive back. I think Fournette's a little more powerful. I do think he's faster. He's a little bit better of an athlete, but the same strengths and weaknesses are there for Fournette as they are for Jeremy Hill, where they're not going to fit in the Bengals the way the Bengals have played the last 5-6 years of being a spread offense, a quick timing passing offense that plays out of the shotgun. I think that's a big reason why Jeremy Hill doesn't fit with the Bengals lately and why Jeremy Hill struggles as much as he does. I think Leonard Fournette would struggle the same way that Hill has if the Bengals want to keep that offense. I would say I think the Bengals are kind of searching for an identity on offense. I'm not sure, as they went through last year with the offense struggling as much as it did, I'm not sure they're ready to say we're a spread team that's going to put it all on Andy Dalton's shoulders. Maybe they watch Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys without the same offensive line and say, let's minimize the quarterback. Let's lean on a power running back that can carry it 25 times a game, and let's have a good defense, because I think the defense played well last year for the most part. If that's their plan, I can definitely see them taking Fournette at 9. You mentioned Joe Mixon, but I think Mixon on the field is the best running back in this draft. I think he's a top 10 player in this draft, just on the field and production wise. I think he'd be a tremendous fit for the Bengals. Athleticism, vision. He's elusive. He can break tackles. His route running and hands. He's a complete player, offensive player. And I think Christian McCaffrey would bring a lot to the Bengals, honestly. I don't think he fits at 9. I'm not sure if that value is there for a guy that's probably more of a passing game running back. I do think he can run between the tackles, but at the same time, I don't think I'm giving it to him 250 times in that scenario. So I don't know if he's worth the 9th pick for the Bengals, but for a team that's in the 15s or 20s, definitely McCaffrey's probably a better option than Fournette in the top 10, where maybe the Panthers and maybe the Bengals that take him, maybe the Jets. I do think Fournette goes in the top 10. I'm not sure he's worth that for the Bengals.
Thanks, Joe. You had mentioned the offensive line earlier, so I'm going to flip it over to the defensive side and ask a question that has come up very frequently on Cincy Jungle, and that is the idea of having a need at edge rusher, especially on the right side where Michael Johnson has pretty much struggled ever since he's been there. And then obviously have Goodberry, but the problem with Goodberry is he's kind of rotational. He's not really that pure speed edge kind of guy. Looking at the draft coming up in April, the biggest name, once you get past, obviously, the Browns probably going number 1 with the kid from A&M. You have guys coming up such as Solomon Thomas, who seems to be more of an inside guy if he falls to them. And then after that, the general perception is there seems to be a drop-off with guys like Taco or Barnett out of Tennessee. Do you see the Bengals possibly taking a defensive end at number 9? And if they did, who do you think would be the best pick for them at that spot?
I actually think that's their preference. If the right defensive end is there, that's what I think they're gonna pick at number 9, or at least what I think they'd like to pick at number 9. Ideally, I think Solomon Thomas would be the perfect fit for them. He'd play right defensive end on base four in the base 4-3. He'd kick inside the way the Bengals have done with Goodberry and before that Antoine Odom, Jonathan Fanene, Frosty Rucker. They've always done that with those guys. But this is like those guys on steroids. Solomon Thomas. He's athletic. He's strong. I think you watch his games in order, and he consistently got better, and it culminated in that last bowl game where he dominated. I think that's exactly who he could end up being, and his workout numbers just proved also, because I think workout numbers is a big thing for pass rushers. If you look at the top guys in the league, the guys that have over 12, 13, 14 sacks a year, combine numbers for some reason have a big correlation with pass rushers. So when you see a guy like Derek Barnett, who was highly productive in college in Tennessee, and you look at his numbers and his explosion is lacking, and his agility was there in the 3-cone, but you can tell that when you watch him on film and you go back, you say, yeah, he can get around the corner, but he might be snap jumping. He might be guessing the snap, and you watch his home games versus his away games. And I tell everyone to do this. Go to draftbreakdown.com. They've got videos of all these prospects, all their games. Watch the away games and watch the home games with Derek Barnett. The home games, he has the crowd on his side, and he's much more dangerous when he can jump the snap and time the snap and get around that corner, and offensive linemen barely get a hand on him. I think he needs to get stronger. I think his hands need to get better. I think he needs to learn a power move and an inside move. I think he's someone they will like because of his production. But at the same time, I think he's going to take some time, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and that's not rare for a pass rusher to need a year or two. But Derek Barnett is definitely a guy I think they would like, but may not be that instant impact guy. I think Taco Charlton fits what they like and what they have liked. And I thought his tests were okay, but he can play the left side, right side. He played a little bit inside also. For a big guy, he's explosive and played well against the run. I think it could be an option. I feel like it's a bit of a reach at 9 if Solomon Thomas isn't there to take the next defensive end. After Garrett and Thomas, probably the 2 elite defensive ends in this class, there's probably 8 or 9, maybe even 10 guys that are going to go in the top 60 picks at defensive end, pass rusher, edge rusher, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure I want to be the team that takes the first guy. There's a lot of pressure in that pick. You need to make sure you get it right. You can't miss. And the same guy may be there at 41, maybe not exactly Derek Barnett or Taco Charlton, but the same quality guy may be there at 41, whether that's Derek Rivers from Youngstown State, whether it's Carl Lawson from Auburn, a small school or a big school guy. 2 edge rushers in the second round. It could be Charles Harris from Missouri. It could be Takaris McKinley from UCLA because he had a shoulder injury. That gap is not large at all, if there is one. So I think they would like Derek Barnett, maybe even Taco, but if I could see them saying that same value is going to be there at 41 for defensive end, let's go wide receiver. Let's go linebacker. Maybe. I don't think they're leaning that way, but I think wide receiver, maybe it's Leonard Fournette, maybe it's O.J. Howard, just based on him being a top 10 player and a freak athlete and a guy that looks like he's could probably play alongside Tyler Eifert, allow a little bit more blocking. This is O.J. Howard, Alabama tight end. And if Eifert can't stay healthy, then he's your guy. So I could see it going a few ways, but defensive end, I think, is their preference. And if Solomon Thomas is there, I think that's a win for everyone.
We're talking with Joe Goodberry, draft expert, Cincy Jungle friend, long-time colleague in terms of writing and podcasting. Great to have you on, Joe. You can follow Joe at Joe Goodberry on Twitter, and he's got a lot of cool stuff that he puts up on his Twitter account, so follow him there. Joe, if you've got some extra time, we've got a couple of questions kind of from the listeners that are listening live here. It seems a couple of people have asked in our YouTube chat about Reuben Foster. And obviously, you mentioned that you just mentioned the edge rushers and Solomon Thomas, guys like that. The Bengals brought in Kevin Minter. They let go of Ray Maualuga. Kevin Minter seems to kind of be a younger and improved version of Maualuga, if you will. And, they kind of have a little bit of a vacancy on that other side. Now, there's also Vontaze Burfict and his issues of regularly getting on the field, whether it's suspensions, injuries, that sort of thing. On one hand, you look at it and you kind of go, well, maybe you froth at the mouth a little bit by having Foster, Burfict, and Minter in the middle of your defense next year. on the other hand, you've got Nick Vigil, you've got Vinny Ray. What's the value of him at number 9? Do you think he's in the? Just now, you kind of said he may or may not be in the cards. And what's your scouting report on him?
Foster's a guy I feel pretty confident in being a good player. I just don't know how great he'll be. You watch him on tape, and he's flying around, and he's athletic, and he's fast. He hits hard. He plays hard. The weird part is he was never part of a turnover at Alabama, never forced a fumble, never recovered a fumble, never had an interception. It kind of makes you think, will he be limited as just a tackle machine type guy? And if so, as an inside linebacker, maybe he can play a little outside. The way the Bengals play, mostly of their guys are playing inside. But maybe he's just a tackle machine. And if that's the case, is that worth the number 9 pick? Or do you want somebody better? Do you want Luke Kuechly? Do you want Patrick Willis? I think you would if you're drafting a non-pass rushing linebacker in the top 10. I'm just not sure that Reuben Foster is that guy. I do feel like he'll be good. I think the fit is weird for the Bengals. And as you said, they have Burfict and they have Minter. I like to think of the nickel defense as the base defense. 2 linebackers are going to play the majority of the game. For the Bengals, having those 2 guys are likely your nickel guys. I think they do want to get Nick Vigil into a little bit more of a role, more coverage role if possible. So I think that's somebody they want to work in, and maybe he's starting at Sam. Somehow Vincent Ray finds a way to lead the team in snaps every single year at linebacker. Somebody gets hurt, someone gets suspended, whatever the case may be, he's going to find his way on the field. I think they have 4 guys they like. I don't think Foster is the guy at 9. I'd be surprised if he was the best player available, and I'd be surprised if they thought the value was there at that pick. Linebacker is a need still, but I think it's a need to get an athletic guy that's good in coverage that fits with the other guys. They really need an outside linebacker or a nickel linebacker.
Yeah, more of a complementary type of guy in terms of his skill set rather than the big thumper types that they always seem to like. We do have another question for you and it's not so much Bengals related, but it's from Aaron Siegel. Joe, any prospects in the first round you feel should go way earlier than they're being projected to go this year?
We talked a little bit about Christian McCaffrey, and I do think he ends up going in the late teens to the 20s. If it's the right team that didn't have a running back or a weapon, a passing game running back, a weapon like that, he's probably going to end up being a top 12 player from this draft. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But because of the value of the running back, because it's probably deemed as being smaller and probably not an every down guy, he's going to go later. Maybe John Ross sneaks into the end of the first round. It's going to be dependent on his medicals. Every team's going to have a different opinion on his medicals, both legs, both knees. He's had a lot of issues. He's come back stronger every time, faster, jumping higher every time. But in terms of being a weapon, he's probably up there with anybody as an offensive weapon in this draft. I don't know if he goes even in the first round because of the medicals. He may, and he probably should, but even at number 9, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals saw that speed and saw it as a weapon to add to the offense. So that'd be the high point for him. But yeah, John Ross is a guy that I think will end up being a top 10, 12 player from this draft.
I want to welcome in Connor Howe, who is joining us a little late on the program, but obviously one of our regular co-hosts. And Connor, I believe you have a question for Joe Goodberry. Welcome to the show, first of all. And you're on with Joe, Scott, and I.
Yeah, what's up, Joe? We've
Connor.
gone back and forth on Twitter. I'm just curious because you've been kind of on that team of the Bengals should be open to drafting a quarterback potentially. Are there any guys after you've looked at the film that you would say this guy is worth the number 9 pick, even though we have Andy Dalton on the roster?
I wouldn't be confident in taking any of them at 9. My argument was more they should be open to looking. And when you hear Marvin Lewis say everything's on the table except for quarterback, that rubbed me the wrong way because I feel like the only way you'll actually upgrade your franchise, your team, or maybe even the fate of where this team is going in the next 10 years, and it's just not the Bengals. It could be any team that's struggling right now. Any team picking in the top 10 should look at quarterback because if you're the Bengals and the Panthers, you're not going to be there too often. I'm not saying the Panthers should upgrade from Cam Newton. I'm not saying the Bengals should upgrade from Andy Dalton. But if a guy was there and you're not going to pick top 10 for the next 5 years, hopefully, it may be worth that potential. And we see the way quarterbacks are valued in the NFL. You get one and you flip a guy for a first rounder later or multiple picks, it comes back and may be worth it. The only guy I think might be worth it is Mitch Trubisky. And I'm not sure if I would say I feel confident he's going to be better than Andy Dalton. He may be Andy Dalton. And for a lot of teams, that's good enough. For a lot of teams, they look at that and say, I'll take that guy in the top 10 and hope he's Andy Dalton and hope we get into the playoffs.
Scott Schulze again. I have, first off, I'd like to say thanks for putting a plug in for Draft Breakdown. I absolutely love that site. So it was good to hear someone else mention it. It is amazing how much video you can find on there. One last question I had for you regarding the Bengals picks. Last year, I think they surprised more than a couple people when they selected Nick Vigil as high as they did. He was kind of a surprise pick, smaller school, Utah State. Kind of taken a couple rounds before a lot of the so-called experts kind of had him listed. And then after the fact, we find out the Bengals and a few other teams had him pretty much higher than a lot of the experts had him at. If you were to put on your prognosticator's hat, I guess you have a hat on. I don't know if that's a prediction hat, possibly. Who, based on the Bengals' history and kind of what direction you think they might be going, not going, and depending on who's there, who would you guess, or what are some names you would guess them to draft possibly earlier than the rest of the, everyone else following the draft would expect them? Someone that maybe they grab in an early mid round that makes everyone go, wow, what in the heck? I wasn't expecting them to grab that guy this early.
Yeah, that's a tough question because you get in your own bubble of draft prospects and draft season where you're kind of not sure where guys should go. Right now, it's a weird draft because you feel like there's 50 or 60 guys that could go in the end of the first round, and it depends on where you have them graded, depends on where you have them going. And last year with Nick Vigil, I think it surprised us so much because they just took P.J. Dawson the year before in the third round. Little did we know that they kind of didn't like him or he wasn't responding, whatever the case may be or whatever happened. So it would be a situation like that I think would really surprise us is that someone they drafted the previous year, whether it's a tight end in the second round, like a Bucky Hodges, Virginia Tech, and we go, oh, okay, they're taking a tight end, and here we go. Or maybe it's a Derek Rivers, defensive end. I mentioned him earlier, Youngstown State. They're there at 41, and there's guys like Carl Lawson and Tack McKinley and bigger names on the board, but for a lot of people, it'd be a surprise if a team took Derek Rivers ahead of them. But if you watch the tape, he's as good or if not better than a lot of them, and he tested phenomenally, and everything points to him being a very good player. Another guy I think that fits what they usually like at wide receiver is Texas A&M Josh Reynolds. It's a good receiver class, but I think if you start picking guys you like or guys that you say, I need a deep outside speed guy, he's one of the few after you get out of the first round, and I could see them being there in the second, maybe at 41, maybe it's in the third round, but I could see them liking him a lot. He reminds me of Chris Henry, and if they took him over a couple other big names, I think that would surprise some people.
I've got one more question for you, and I think Draft Twitter has this interesting fascination with McDowell, who doesn't really, for whatever reason, get talked about that much with Bengals Twitter and Bengals, comment sections, all this stuff. What's your opinion of him? Where do you think he's going to go? Do you think, the Bengals would consider him at defensive end? Because I know he played inside and outside a lot.
What was the name? I missed it.
Malik McDowell.
Oh, Malik McDowell. Yeah, I don't know if he's as good as a lot of draft Twitter likes him. He's kind of a tweener of that defensive end, defensive tackle. A lot of guys like that in the NFL right now. I think of Sheldon Richardson from the Jets when I watch Malik McDowell. And you may say that's a good thing, but Richardson is so misused with the Jets at times. Half of his snaps being at defensive end really kills any of his productivity. I think you would get that a lot with McDowell. There's a lot of questions with his concern or with his character, concerns with his motor. He may be there at 41. Now, the Bengals do need an interior pass rusher and nickel if that's all they're going to use him for. And I think the value would be there as a second-round guy if that's the role you have for him. Yeah, I could see that being the pick, and he could definitely help out. I don't like him. He could have had a chance to be like the number 9 conversation, I think, had he answered questions correctly and really atoned for some of the mistakes and some of the calling out of his own teammates and players and coaches. But he didn't do that at the combine. He kind of tanked it and bombed a little bit. So I think that's going to knock him back on a few boards. Based on the tape and based on the measurables, you would think he could be a top 15 player. He's probably not going there. He's probably going 25 to 45.
Joe, I'm gonna combine a listener question along with one of my own here. Again, we're talking with Joe Goodberry, draft expert. Find him on Twitter at Joe Goodberry. And then we'll get you out of here. You've been on and you've been gracious with your time. You've been on for a little while here, and I appreciate it. Michael Myers in our chat, and I don't mean to laugh at a guy's name, but you hear the name and you think of the movie Halloween. But Michael Myers in our chat, YouTube chat, had mentioned that who would you like to see the Bengals take with their second-round pick? Obviously, that's predicated on who they take with their first-round pick and what position they go there. So I'm just going to put you on the spot here and ask you who you think the Bengals' first 3 picks, either players or positions, whatever you think currently. Right now, personally, I'm a little bit more on, let's go a little bit more on offense than defense, because I agree with you. I saw some good things from the defense at the end of the year. It was the offense, especially when injuries hit, that really struggled. But that's me, and I want to ask you what you think maybe for the first 3 picks or so, either names, positions, or both, if you've got them.
I definitely think they need a defensive end. I know they can go out there with Michael Johnson another year and probably put him out there for another 900 snaps the way they've been doing it and probably get a little production out of him, but he'll be a guy they can trust and count on. I think they still have a gap as the third defensive end, whether that's Will Clark or it's Wallace Gilberry. They let Marcus Hunt go. I think that's a 500 snap position, pretty much a starter for them. I think they want to fill it with defensive end and surround it with some offensive picks, because I think the offense really lacked last year in a lot of ways. And if it's not going to be on the offensive line, because I really feel like they have their guys there that they think are going to be the starters and think are going to contribute, I think that leaves them with running back and wide receiver. So I definitely think in some order that'll be their first 3 picks. And now it all depends on who's there at 9. I think they want a defensive end. I think they would like Solomon Thomas to be there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they like the production of Derek Barnett. They like the way he looks. They'll say the 3 cone's good enough, and they'll say we have the luxury of letting him develop for a year or 2 behind Michael Johnson while giving him a few snaps here and there. And I see them going in that direction. If let's say Derek Barnett is the first pick. Today, Tony Pauline reported that the Bengals are targeting Joe Mixon in the second round. That's something that's something I heard a few weeks ago, and really didn't say anything because I don't know if I wanted it to be true or not, because everyone's got a different feeling about it. But if that's the case, it seems like they're targeting running back. Another one I heard that they really like is Alvin Kamara, running back out of Tennessee. If those are the 2 guys they like, it seems to me they want to continue to be a passing offense. They want to play out of shotgun. They want a guy that can pass protect, a guy that can run routes and do a lot of what Giovanni Bernard does. But with him being hurt, with that being the core of their offense and how they play offense, I'm not surprised that those are the 2 guys they like. I could see them going into the second round and saying, we're hurting on the offensive line. We need to get a running back that can create a little bit more than Jeremy Hill has been able to. Let's take one of these guys that's there at 41, whether that's a Kamara, whether that's a Joe Mixon, if that's how it goes down. And I think that's where they go. They target running back in the second round, come into the third, and I think they go wide receiver. Now, there's going to be – I don't know who's going to be there. It seems weird because a lot of guys I like, whether it's Josh Reynolds, whether it's Carlos Henderson, whether it's Chad Hansen, all of them have a chance to go in the top of the second round, I think. All of them have a chance to be there at the end of the third. So it's kind of hard to be sure of what they want in that position. I do think they want a deep speed guy, but it also feels like they want a gadget guy, a guy that replaces maybe like what they had in Andrew Hawkins. They seemed interested in Curtis Samuels from Ohio State. He would be that kind of guy. Now, do they go get a gadget guy where you just get the ball in his hands in the top of the third round? maybe. I think that's more of a later or mid-round pick. I still think with top of the third round is a premium pick, and that's where I'll say they go with a Josh Reynolds, a wide receiver of Texas A&M. He'll be a tall, lanky, outside speed guy. Looks a lot like Chris Henry, moves like A.J. Green. I can't imagine they watch him and say he's not a Bengal receiver. So let's say they go Derek Barnett. I think Mixon's gone before 41. So let's go Alvin Kamara out of Tennessee, and then Josh Reynolds in the third round wide receiver, Texas A&M.
That wouldn't be a terrible haul from a number of different perspectives. And, I think obviously we know that the Bengals don't like to maneuver at least forward in the draft. They will maneuver back, collect picks, but, they don't like to move up. So, anyways, Joe, you've been awesome. Thanks for the time. I know you've got some home projects to get to. You were talking about before the show. Appreciate it. Where just for our listeners, where can they find your stuff? Where can they get access to all of your draft knowledge and all that good stuff?
The best place is Twitter. That's been my blog lately. I just put most of my stuff there. I do some scouting for Bleacher Report, but if you look on Twitter, at Joe Goodberry, just the way it sounds is the way it's spelled. I like to interact. I like to talk Bengals, so find me on there.
And you know what, Joe? This is great because last week we had this discussion for Scott Schulze. He does not have a Twitter account. He writes some great stuff. He puts some stuff on Cincy Jungle. He does not have a Twitter account. So now this is a great way to reel Scott into the world of Twitter.
Twitter is awesome, especially for sports and especially for branching out and meeting people and getting opportunities with other people. You can talk to players, agents, sometimes even coaches are on there, whether it be or another writer or a scout. It's fun. It's a good time. It's good information.
And you, myself, and Connor Howe wouldn't have met, quote unquote, met without Twitter. So Scott, you got to get on the ball, buddy.
It just sounds like you guys are trying to make me get rid of my rotary dial phone.
Maybe. Joe, thanks a bunch.
Gosh.
Thanks a bunch, buddy. Maybe if you're willing, either right before the draft or after the draft, once the Bengals get their picks in and everything, maybe if you're willing, we'll have you on again and we can examine what they did.
Yeah, let's do it. And if they really tank it, then we'll have to crack open the hard stuff and do the show.
Oh gosh,
that would be that would be a fun show. That would be a fun show.
Oh no!
All right. Well, appreciate it, Joe. Congratulations on the new addition to your family, and take care. We'll still be talking to you on Twitter, buddy.
All right, guys. Take care. Everyone, keep up the good work.
Joe.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
All right.
That was Joe Goodberry, draft expert, and a really cool guy. He spent a ton of time with us, and I think everybody kind of prides themselves on being a quasi expert or being at least somewhat educated in the draft. Joe, whether you agree with his opinions or not on certain players, Joe puts in a lot of time watching game film, college game film, pro game film, and he does know quite a bit about what players could fit specifically with the Bengals. He does also do some stuff in case anyone follows the Bills. He lives in kind of the near Buffalo area, so he does know quite a bit about the Buffalo Bills specifically as well. But for the most part, knows a ton about the draft and very entertaining chat. And we're very excited to have him on the show. We were glad that he could carve out some time and take some fan questions.